We're going to go through this shit together, man. We're going to just have a look at each player and how they did last season. I think that's a pretty decent place to start. So, quickly looking at sleepers player cards for each of these guys. So, Tyjae Spears clearly inexperienced, right? He was a rookie last season. Not only that, he was playing behind Derrick Henry, so he had very low volume. He's got pretty much red charts all over the place. So you could see that he only ranked 35th in half PPR. Obviously, he's playing behind Derrick Henry. Only 100 rush attempts, but for 453 yards. Now, where he really made his money or made his cheddar is in the receiving game. So he had 70 targets, 52 receptions for 385 and a touchdown. So didn't get into the end zone very much. Didn't really produce much in terms of volume, but he did kind of, challenge Derrick Henry. So a lot of these games, as you could see, he's over 50% snap rate. There were some games where he was above Derrick Henry, right? And he remained essentially involved. But I think crucially with Tyjae Spears that he looked really good. So anybody who had Henry or had Spears or was just a Titans fan watching these games, you could see that he had juice. Anytime he had the ball, something good would typically happen. So that's kind of like the snapshot of last year for Tyjae Spears. Moving over to Tony Pollard, we kind of have the opposite effect. We have a lot of green charts all over the place now. I'm just going to quickly say this. I think Tony Pollard has been getting over shit on. So I think he was a little bit better than a lot of people are saying. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think he was bad, and I still think he was worse than he's ever been in terms because he's always been a very efficient, very dynamic, very explosive player. Now, the reports are that he was unhealthy, right? That he was dealing with nagging injuries all season. So that could explain why he wasn't effective. But over the course of his career, Tony Pollard kind of has like this ascending chart, right? So it's like backup as a rookie in 19, backup as a rookie in 20, starts to get a little bit more work. As you could see, just his ascent continues. And when he finally takes over the starting job in 2023, you see that his volume increased into like a lead back type role, but all of his numbers decreased. So he had his worst year ever, right? So this is kind of like the fears that a lot of people had with Alvin Kamara. And Alvin Kamara kind of had a similar type of career trajectory, right? Really effective and efficient when he did get work, but as soon as he got the starting role, we see his efficiency really go down. Now, little side note, dude, I'm just thinking about this right now. Devon, could the same thing happen to HN? That makes me a little bit worried because I am in on him in many leagues, but that's essentially the situation. I do think he's a little bit better than we saw. I mean, he starts the season with 21, 16, and 13 fantasy points in half PPR. Pretty solid. Very, involved as a receiver, especially. He had 2 touchdowns in the first game, which I think many people were like, nice. Well, looks like I got, a top 5 RB. And then kind of like, was pretty pedestrian these kind of middle weeks until like week 10, where he kind of wakes up again. He has like a nice little 4-game stretch here where he scores a touchdown in each game or gets, decent amount of receptions to make up for a lack of that touchdown. But essentially he looked slow. He really wasn't hitting gaps very well. He wasn't really turning corners well like he used to. He used to be that guy who would hit the sideline and could outrun linebackers and safeties and stuff. But we really didn't see that, right? They kind of turned him into a between the tackles type guy, and it was kind of unfortunate. Now, moving on, I wanted to look deeper into the advanced stats. So I did go to PFF, brought up the premium stats, and I was actually really surprised by what I saw here. So essentially, Tony Pollard was better last season. According to PFF, when you look at the 2023 stats, if you look down here where I am currently highlighting, he had a 77 in total offensive rating, right? So 77, keep that in mind, with Tony Pollard actually having a 77.5. So that's something I did not expect, right? And I think Tony Pollard even had a higher run percent. So 84.7 as pure rushing versus 77.8. So Tyjae Spears is a little bit better like across the board in passing and pass blocking and in running. But Tony Pollard obviously was a better runner, which I did not expect. Maybe that's what's bringing his average up, because you could see that he's got like orange, yellow, and light green and some of these other categories. Not really what you want to see. As I mentioned, it's like an efficiency thing. He just wasn't very good. But overall, looks like he was better than Tyjae Spears. Now, if you look at like the breakdown over the course of the season, Tyjae Spears was, pretty average most of these weeks. You can make the case, you can make the argument that, well, he wasn't getting the volume, right? Like, how do you get momentum? How do you establish yourself if you're just not getting the opportunity, right? Tony Pollard was getting the opportunity and really, had a very similar chart, right? Like in week 18, Tyjae Spears was fantastic, it seems. Only played 17 snaps, so maybe that's why. I guess that's more of a low volume equals efficiency type of argument. But moving on, I was looking everywhere on Twitter, on YouTube, looking for stuff about Spears versus Pollard in terms of like camp reports. There's really been not much. Let me know if you guys have found anything. But I did find that yesterday, or no, okay, 1 second. I'm gonna go back. So yesterday there was a report from Callahan, or Brian Callahan, their new head coach. We're going to talk about Brian Callahan and the impact that I think he's going to have, or that, some people think he's going to have on the team. So we're going to watch these two videos together.
Coach's standpoint, is it a little bit more unique?
Yeah.
In the running backs room, just with two similar backs in terms of deciding who will be the starter with Tyjae and Tony?
Yeah, I don't really look at them as one starting over the other, truthfully. I think they both have really unique skills that we're going to find a way to use in a lot of different ways. Then that's the fun part for me right now is how are we going to deploy those guys? And maybe they both play at the same time. Maybe one gets hot and we let them run. Maybe one gets, maybe we just rotate back and forth. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. But they're both going to play quite a bit of football for us. And I don't view either one of them as a starter or a backup. They're both starting players to me. And then
real quick, so he basically said he views both of them as RB1s or starters. He did say that they're both going to be very involved. So coach speak, I don't know. Let's continue.
The rest of the running back room is going to be fun to see how that shakes out. I mean, we still need guys to contribute on special teams from the running back.
All right, so he pretty standard here. Just says, we need other guys, but he views them as 1A, 1B. Now, in this little thread from Coach Speak Index where they're kind of gathering all these different, like this is back from May 22nd where he spoke about them. He talks about Spears' route running. I don't think we really need to watch this one, but he does say, and this is important, I think it's worth watching at least the beginning. Let's watch the beginning of this.
Tony and Tyjae have such similar skill sets. From what you've seen of them so far, how do they distinguish themselves from one another?
That's a good question. I think Tyjae's got a little bit a different route running ability, and Tony's he's a smoother runner. They're both really explosive. Those guys are the ones I'm probably of all the groups that we have. I think those guys are the ones that are the most exciting for me. Just all the different places you can put those guys in the formation, all the different.
All right, so pretty clear to me what we can decipher from that. He essentially views Tyjae Spears as a little bit of a better route runner, or a different route runner, like he said. And he views Tony Pollard as more of a smooth runner, more of a between the tackles runner. Pair that with the fact that we do know, based on PFF, Tony Pollard was a better pure runner, it seemed. And Tyjae Spears seemed to be better kind of across the board, kind of as a pass blocker, as a receiver. Seems like, now here's my expectation, here's what I think. It turns out being that Tony Pollard gets a lot of the early down stuff, maybe first and second down. And I think Tyjae Spears gets maybe some third downs and some drives where he gets like first, second, and third potentially. But I do think you're going to see both backs on most drives. Maybe they switch drives, one or the other. Maybe a negative game script. It's just Tyjae. I can see that happening too. Now, the reason this is so fucking confusing, in my opinion, is because Pollard is also a fantastic receiving running back, right? He's one of the better receiving running backs. That was his original role before Zeke Elliott was gone, right? So that's what makes all of this kind of a clusterfuck. Like, again, offensive coordinator Nick Holtz views them as interchangeable, as 1A, 1B, kind of just echoing the same sentiment. So let's talk about Callahan. Let's talk about what this offense is going to look like. You guys might fucking recognize the name. So he's the son of Bill Callahan, an old head coach. I don't really know much about him, but basically Draft Sharks creates this shit every year. It's super good, where they talk about kind of like the head coaching impacts on different teams, right? So I found Tennessee Titans. Basically, the takeaway from this is that we can expect their passing rates to potentially go higher. So Brian Callahan, to sum it up, played with some pretty good quarterbacks, right? Peyton Manning, Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, in some various like assistant roles and stuff like that, quarterbacks coach. So he's kind of an offensive-minded head coach to begin with, right? So that's kind of the main thing. The second main thing that we like a lot is that Callahan comes from the Sean McVay system in some way. Let's see where I saw that. So Holtz is kind of an unknown guy. That's the offensive coordinator, but it does look like Callahan will be calling the plays. So I don't know how that's going to shake out. We really don't know. But his most recent stint, Callahan, was as the offensive coordinator for the Bengals. Even though Taylor, the head coach of the Bengals, was doing most of the play calling, Callahan had a say in it. And I do think they were a pass-heavy team. They were ranked top 5 in 11 personnel rate, and the Titans were never top 20, right, under Mike Vrabel. So Cincinnati also ranked top 6 in pass rate. That's something that we do want to see, especially for backs like Pollard and Spears. I think they kind of fit that mold perfectly of like a pass-heavy team. So run game impact. Let's have a look at this. Spread out base formational lightened boxes for Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. So I think a combination of the style that these guys play with, as well as the fact that they'll be passing a lot more, and the fact that they have 2 kind of distinguished players, means you kind of can start to see where their roles might shake out, right? So a better offensive line also with Cushenberry, and then they spent a round 1 pick on J.C. Latham, so their offensive line should be better, so that should help Pollard. But they should be pass heavy, which should help both of them, but maybe Spears more. So that seems to be my takeaway. I think it really comes down to whether Will Levis can operate the offense and kind of keep defenses honest. If they can score points, stay in games, they can be a neutral game script or even positive game script. But that's a big if, right? So you basically have like 2 realities that can exist. Will Levis blows Cox, and they struggle, and they're a negative game script. Tyjae Spears is very, involved. He's fine, and they're in neutral game scripts or even positive. And then I think you'll have both guys. But I think both guys are pretty safe picks. Here is my thoughts on the matter. I think Tyjae Spears is the guy that I'm going to be going after. I've already drafted him in some leagues. I just think that he showed what he could do last season. I know there's a new coaching staff, but he's been with the team. He has some juice, while Tony Pollard, the last we saw of him is that he did not have a lot of juice. And if he was injured and he's fine now and he has juice, I'm wrong. But I do think like seniority, him being on the team, I do think that like if he pops off early, I do imagine them leaning on him. Now, Callahan did say in one of those videos we watched that they're going to play like a hot hand type approach. So anything can happen any week, and that's what makes both of them kind of risky. That's why both of them are kind of later round picks. But I think they're both valuable picks, to be honest. That's like my total, my takeaway of the takeaway. They're both value. I lean towards Spears because he's a little bit more of a value because you can get him a tiny bit later, maybe like a round later than Pollard. Those are my thoughts, man. Let me know what you guys think, dude. If you guys found any type of info on these guys, I would love to fucking hear it. I'd love to see any beat writer reports or anything. I've been scouring the web, dude. Scouring. I might get fired from my job because I've been spending so much time on this. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Peace.